I think my Biles 23M, best friend 23M, is trying to get with my 25M wife 28F, and he's encouraging it. Am I delusional? My wife's 2080 half-brother, who was born as a result of their mother's extramarital relationship, is my Bile 23M. After discovering that Bile wasn't his biological son through a paternity test, their father divorced their mother when my wife was 12 years old. My file severed his relationship with Bill, but he kept up a relationship with my wife, leading Bile to develop an unhealthy attachment to her. I'm seeking advice here before bringing up a matter with my wife, because she is fiercely protective of her brother and doesn't like it when people are mean to him. My wife and I bought a home with an indoor pool last year. When Bile first saw it, he was overjoyed and asked if he and his friend could occasionally use it. We stipulated that they must notify us in advance of their visit. Bile and his friend, Charlie, have used the pool several times before. Usually when my wife isn't around, she works long hours as a doctor. Due to the pandemic, my wife now works from home. Bill requested permission to bring Charlie and use the pool, but I refused out of concern for the safety of our unborn child. My wife agreed to let them quarantine for 2 weeks, though when Bill suggested it. Bile and Charlie visited our home 2 weeks later. They greeted each other and then went straight to the pool because my wife was at work. My wife came out of her office after about an hour, and we hung out in the kitchen. Charlie, Bill's friend, entered the kitchen shortly after and spent the majority of his time chatting with my wife there. She appeared to be flirting with him and giggled a lot, which bothered me. They asked my wife if she worked from home every day before they left, and she said yes. He visits the house to swim every single day for the next 2 weeks, except Charlie never gets in the water. Instead, he spends every day lounging around the house in his swim trunks. Up until that point, he was wearing board shorts, if that makes any difference. He always jumps in and keeps my wife talking until she has to go back to work whenever she comes out to hang out with me. I made lunch for us all, and when I excused myself to call my wife down, my Bill quickly stopped me and said Charlie could call her for me. When Charlie went to get her, they exchanged looks, and Charlie appeared genuinely happy. Charlie has also started to get touchier with my wife. He stands or sits very close to her, placing his hands on her shoulders and waist. To my wife's credit, whenever he does something like this, she usually puts distance between them. The reason I believe my Bile is in on this is because he's made a few pregnancy-related jabs at me recently. He told me a story about how one of his friend's girlfriends was cheating on him, and then said something along the lines of, "Did you know a lot of women start cheating when they are expecting?" He's also made comments about how I look fat now, and it looks weird next to my wife because she's fit. If he spots my wife out of the office, he quickly goes to inform Charlie. I really want to say no, but I'm afraid my Bile will complain to my wife if I do. My Bill texted me yesterday asking if they could come over to swim next week. I ideally want to have a conversation with her before then, but I'm not sure if I should mention the flirting. Am I being paranoid? Cuck update. It turned out that I didn't need to. My phone flashed with another text from my Bile informing me that he will now be here the following day at Wuntmeppen to go swimming with Cole while we were watching a movie. I should advise him not to come because my wife witnessed it. My wife usually makes accommodations for my Bile and almost never says no to him, so this is pretty odd behavior on her part. We continued watching the movie after I asked her if anything had happened. She interrupted the movie a little while later and said she had a question for me. She questioned me about how Charlie never went swimming when he visited our place.
I'd want to think that I'm cool, headed like the comments suggested, but
I finally broke out in hysterics. To be completely honest, I was simply so happy she had brought it up rather than me. My wife probably believed I was crazy at the time. She asked again and stated that she wanted a serious response when I eventually stopped laughing. She clumsily retorted, "Well, you must have noticed the other thing too," when I said, "Of course I've noticed it. Of course I've noticed," in order to summarize the discussion that followed. Because she was so preoccupied with work the first few days, my wife wasn't really paying attention to anything else until Charlie started to flirt with her. She claimed that the moment she realized he was interested in her came when he began to get touchy. She claims that because she didn't want to unnecessarily worry me, she never brought it up, but because she didn't stop it right away, she was scared that I would have seen it too and assumed she was interested. She knew we would ultimately need to talk about this, but she wasn't sure how to approach the subject. Oh, the irony. She did talk with Charlie in private, informing him that she was happily married, and that she had no desire in beginning a relationship with anybody else. He kept doing it, so it seems he never took her seriously. In the end, she called her brother on Sunday to tell her either she got her to stop or Chris couldn't come over anymore. Her brother ended up having a tantrum and said a few nasty things about me, the baby or relationship. She insisted I was somehow behind her request and made some comments about how I was controlling and insecure because I looked like a beach whale and Charlie was younger and hotter. She was pretty pissed at this and said if she said something like that about me again, she would stop speaking to her. She claimed I had baby-trapped her, and when my wife pointed out we were already married so I didn't need to trap her, and that she was the one who wanted to start a family, she kept insisting I had manipulated her into feeling that way. He claimed she was unhappy in our relationship, and she always looked tired because I was forcing her to slave away to fund my fancy lifestyle whilst I sat on my ass all day. My wife pointed out she chose to be a lawyer knowing she would have to work long hours and I had only recently left my job, so his accusations were baseless. He said some other stuff along the same lines, but the thing that made my wife finally snap was when he said the baby was already ruining everything and it was just going to get worse when it was born, and I should have taken her to the abortion clinic whilst I had the chance. She told him neither he nor his friend were welcome in our home anymore until he apologized for how he'd been behaving and for the things he said. She said she wasn't sure she could ever forgive or forget what he said about our child, even if he did apologize, and she couldn't believe he would even think something like that, let alone say it. Apparently, he started crying and said he was sorry, that he didn't mean it and he was just scared to lose her and that he wasn't thinking clearly. She hung up on him. I showed my wife my phone and he's been calling me and texting me since begging me to reply. She asked if he'd said anything to me. I was debating whether to say anything or not, but she kept insisting she knew he had said something and she wanted to know what it was. I told her the things I mentioned in the original post and a few other things he had said. She asked me why I never mentioned anything when he first said it, and I mentioned how she got really defensive whenever I said anything even slightly negative about her brother, and she got defensive. I pointed out she was doing it again, and after some back and forth, she admitted that maybe she was a little bit defensive when it came to him, but she promised to stop and she wanted to make sure we could talk about anything, including her brother. She ended up mentioning wanting to try couples counseling. She said it wasn't because she thought there was something wrong with our relationship, but apparently she has been speaking to her mom a lot recently, and she mentioned one thing she regretted about her marriage with Phil is that they never went to therapy until the cracks in their relationship were too big. In her current marriage, they go, and it's helped her avoid the mistakes of her first marriage. I agreed, so we're probably going to try that soon. My wife thinks my bile will eventually turn up even if we tell him not to, but she promised she'd deal with him if he does. So, Reddit, I guess you were right. I really did just need to speak to her. Thanks for the advice and comments. I enjoyed reading them all. Redditors' reactions. Redditor 1. I love a good update. Your wife is a keeper. Good on both of you. So happy it all worked out. Love you and your baby and your wife who is willing to stick up for you and herself and your baby. Edit. My first awards. Thanks, Reddit friends. Redditor follow-up. It sounds like Bile may be jealous of the baby, and that's a bigger issue than Charlie. Bile is needy and the baby is going to take priority over him. Charlie is just a distraction and a tool to get her away from me and baby. I bet there will be a lot more need to stick up for the baby in the future. Redditor 2. Charlie and your bill sound massively trashy. Redditor follow-up. For real. I chuckled at, it's because Charlie is younger, though. They're 23 and 25. Big ducking whoop. Redditor 3. I don't know why, but I feel like you folks need to get a Ring doorbell or a security camera system in place. Redditor follow-up. Yes, if they don't, I believe they will go home one day to see their sibling and their friend chilling in the house with a broken door lock. Redditor 4. This is a good update. A couple communicating honestly that solves a problem and going to therapy for a check-in to help them facilitate better communication in the future. You love to see it. Wishing you and your spouse the best, and I hope this means a little less stress for you during your pregnancy. Redditor follow-up. It seems like most conflict in life either stems from or is furthered by lack of communication or dishonesty. Honestly, I feel like if people would just communicate and be straight up with others, the majority of interpersonal conflicts could be avoided entirely. Even touchy stuff, like how my spouse suggested marriage counseling. A lot of people would be worried like, oh, is my marriage having problems? But when you just simply say what you mean and are honest with people, you'll find that usually they're thinking the same thing you are,